All right, welcome everybody to the very first Warrior Poet Project podcast. Here with my man CK Chin.
What's up? How's everyone doing?
So we have no video for this podcast here, but we do going straight audio. We got an hourglass turned over. The sands of time are ticking, and we're going to take you on a little ride here for 1 hour and hopefully figure some shit out in the process.
That's right.
And see where we end up.
That's right.
So, CK, now you are one of the hardest working individuals that I have ever come across in my days. And one thing I wanted to ask you about and get your perspective on is your motivation to keep going. Because I've watched you work taking 4 days off, literally 4 days off. This isn't hey, it's Sunday, let's chill out and watch football. Literally 4 days off in a 2-year period, 4 days a year, one every season, as you were managing a fantastic restaurant at the time. So what is it that's your driving force behind what you do and your outlook?
It's one of those things. Well, I appreciate that. While it's a little bit of an exaggeration, probably, but you're pretty close. It's probably closer to 12 for the whole year, or once a month. But the motivation behind it is really a matter of me kind of realizing that, if I don't do it, nobody will. Nobody's going to help me out to do this, and so I have to do it. And it's kind of it's a means to an end. It really is. For me, it's like my ultimate goals in the end is to have a family and to be able to spend time with them. I grew up in a situation where it was somewhat of a broken family, and so I didn't have a lot of time to spend with. My mom was working so much, and then my dad wasn't around, and so on and so forth. And so it's kind of like when the time comes for me to have that, I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't want to have to have that struggle. And so to me, it's like I'm not where I'm at to where I can comfortably not think about work. And that's kind of been my motivation. Is just like, let's just set the chess pieces in place and set everything. It's like I feel like my life is like a Rube Goldberg machine. I'm talking about one of those things that the ball hits the little match and the match lights the candle and the candle does it. And it's kind of like if I set that all up and then I'm like, all right, well, I think it's set up now, and I press it. And then everything just kind of falls into place. Like that's kind of how I live my life. It's like I'm going to keep doing this and setting it up until I feel comfortable with what the end result is going to be. And then I can sit back and kind of breathe. I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of thing,
Yeah, so for you, you're able to kind of project what your future goals are and then see what it's going to take to get there. And then you just keep that constantly in mind. Is that like something that just stays with you on your shoulder as you're putting in these hours? And obviously there's some aspect of you enjoying what you do. I know you enjoy being around people and all that, but it's not easy, to stay that motivated. So is it some vision of your family, some vision of the future that you just keep constantly in mind, like the soldier that has the picture of his girl in his wallet as he's sitting in the barracks,
I mean, in a little bit there's that, and then there's also a little bit of I have somewhat of a, some visions of grandeur, a little bit, like not so much in a monetary sense, but, I joke with people about it all the time where, like, so much of my motivation in life stems from my hatred of lines, of like waiting in line for stuff or not being able to get to where I need to be or want to be. And there's something out of my control keeping me from doing that. And so, it's kind of like, you'll hear me talk about movies all the time because I'm a bit of a movie freak, but like in Forrest Gump, when he's talking about how Lieutenant Dan invested in Apple for him, like a fruit company, remember? And he was like, and he told me I don't have to worry about money anymore. And he's like, oh, that's great. It was one less thing. And that's my outlook on it. It's kind of like a checklist to sit there and say, well, there's just a couple things I want to just scratch off my list and not have to think about it anymore. And so a lot of this motivation stems from like, well, at the end of the day, if I look around and go, is there more work to be done? And the answer is yes. Then I'm motivated to do it again. One of these days, and it might never come, and I might be, this mentality might set me up to be perpetually working, but, one of these days, I hope I look around and I go, and it was good, and I get to sit down, and then that's kind of where, I don't know where that came from necessarily.
Because it's not easy for people, it's a pretty remarkable trait. I mean, we see it all over the place, and even with myself, I think we had this conversation just personally the other day. I'm certainly more of a sprinter myself. I can put an incredible output for a short period of time, and then I gotta relax. I gotta get my electrolytes in. I gotta go talk to the crowd, you know. But at least my ability to focus for a brief period and just blast and not let any distractions hit me and reach full capacity for a short while has served me. But I really admire the people who can maintain a constant level of output like that for you. But there's a lot of people who have just a lot of trouble with the motivation for either. You know.
I think that we as a culture, especially our generation, you know, I put ourselves in the same generation as, and has a problem with entitlement. You know, and I think that the problem is that I think a lot of people feel like some things are owed to them. You know, that I feel that, you know, I read an article the other day that says that, you know, there's certain things that we have an expectation, and because of the media as being so rampant and there's advertising in every angle, that you can't look at anything without advertisement anymore. And on a level of, even on a subconscious level, it tells you that this is what you're owed. Meaning, you know, this goofy guy with sipping a coffee, all of a sudden this crazy hot Italian girl shows up in a badass, you know, Italian sports car, and you as a person, no matter not knowing your surroundings, not even fully realizing where you are in life, feel like that is ultimately owed to you. And you almost feel like at the end, rather than blaming yourself, saying that, man, I didn't achieve what I should have achieved, you're like, man, I wasn't given what I was owed. Yeah. You know, and I think that causes people to sit back and mope. You know, to sit down and go, man, you know, it's like all you have to do is watch infomercials, you know, and realize that you're like, you really think that this is a whole culture of people at 4 o'clock in the morning eating Cheetos, sitting there going, yo, there's this new exercise equipment, dog. If I buy it, I'll get a 6-pack. I promise. You know, this is amazing. And you're like, you're not owed a 6-pack. Those people work for that. Like, it's not, you know, that's not the way it works.
So what, you know, we're going to be talking more about this as we talk, you know, kind of utopia theory and whatnot coming up. But, you know, do you think there was some way in which you were raised, or perhaps some part of your culture? For those of you who can't see the very large Chinese man sitting in front of me, CK is Chinese, and so he is comes from a different culture than I do, and so when I reference that, that's what you'll get, despite his very white baritone voice.
Right. Absolutely. I talk about it before. My mother, actually, I was probably, I had to been 8 or 9, mentioned to me one time, and just in passing, it wasn't like, you know, it's not something, it wasn't too dramatic. It wasn't like she sat me down and, you know, had a whole ceremony or anything. But, you know, he was just like, you know, I was born in North Carolina, so I'm an American through and through, born on American soil. I'm not even like an American citizen. I'm an American, you know. Mm-hmm. But, you know, she made it a point to sit there and says, you know, you look Chinese. Nobody's going to look at you and go, hey, you know, look at that American guy over there. You know, at this point in our culture, you know, there's still some degree of like looking at somebody and categorizing them by their ethnicity a little bit rather than their nationality. You know, which is fine. I'm not arguing anything about that. That's a whole other podcast we have to talk about. But one of the things she said was, you have to realize that when you do something, you're not only representing yourself, you're representing your entire culture. You know, and I'm like 8. You know, but she's like,
heavy.
When you do something, they're not going to go, oh man, CK is stupid, or CK is lazy, or CK is this. He's going to be like, man, Chinese people are lazy. You know, oh, Chinese people don't know how to do this and stuff like that. And you know, I thought about that, and it's like, you know, she has a point. There's a legitimacy to it a little bit, because stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. You know, and there's a reason why we fall victim, or we fall into this trap of deciding that, because I think that's human nature. I think your brain is naturally categorical. You need to. You know, we talked about it before. If a caveman got mauled by a tiger, came back and was like, yo, this thing with stripes fucked my boy up. Yeah. Then you see a zebra, you're going to be like, don't get into that, man. I don't know. You know, and you need to have that.
Pattern building is part of survival.
Part of survival, absolutely. Being able to recognize that. And so, you know, that really stuck with me. I really remember that, because it's true. It's like, I feel like I'm representative of a lot of things. And it even got to the point where, and I ended up not doing it, but, I think about legacy a lot because, I still carry my dad's name. My dad really didn't do very much to raise me. And at one point, I almost changed my last name to my mother's name.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was like, you know what? Let's say I do become something great, and 2,000 years from now, they're going to learn about me, and they're not going to remember my mother's side of the family that did all the work.
Yeah,
I never did. I feel like it's a little bit dramatic and stuff. And I think that if I make my mark deep enough, people will do their research. But but that did. I actually legitimately thought about that. It was like, man, maybe I should.
Because of the legacy. I think that's a really good point, because for so many people, we don't have that sense of legacy or that sense of culture or that sense of tribe that used to exist, and I think there's some social reinforcing pride that can help keep you in line and keep you motivated and keep you wanting to work, for the benefit of others that we just don't have. I mean, right now, it's this really kind of weird, homogenous, but still isolated, almost solipsistic culture where people don't hardly even talk on the phone. They're just texting. They're communicating through more electronic means, and they're getting more isolated even as they're pretending like they're more connected through this World Wide Web. But really, you feel less a part of a group. And, and the idea of your name lasting immortally, that was the biggest deal for the ancients in antiquity, and ancient Greeks and Romans. It was, your name will live forever, and that was a big fucking deal. And they really cared about that. But here, it's not really about that. It's more like FBGM, fuck bitches, get money, and whatever, whatever. So when your goals are less about legacy and more about immediate satisfaction, it's, I think, harder for some people to kind of put off the daily pleasure to seek, ultimate making your mark and having a big legacy. So I think there's a lot of issues at play, and I think for you, having that sense of culture and then having a belief that you want to carry your name, and make a mark in history, I think is maybe getting down to the root of what allows you to, put in that kind of sacrifice and put in that kind of effort that's coming out with success. I know you got a great restaurant opening up here coming up soon. For everybody in Austin, Texas, keep a lookout for Swift's Attic. It's dope. It's delicious.
It's it's true. I think that the foresight, or the like what you said, is the people's looking towards what goes beyond their immediate life, or even their immediate time in that they're still going to be alive. They're not even looking at their end game. There's a joke about that we live now, like, who cares? The last few years, nobody's thinking about their retirement plan. Most people aren't. They're like, that's why there's diabetes. Like, I'm gonna eat the second hamburger now. Why not? But also you'll see it's systemic because there's a situation where the evolution, in my opinion, has halted the human race to a certain degree, because we have no natural predators, and the strongest and best aren't passing on their seed. They're not passing on their genes. It's a matter of the actual opposite. It's the dumber and the less apt are the ones that end up breeding. And, I talked about how in the last...
Well, not necessarily breeding, but at least reproducing.
Right.
We got, the best are still breeding, but they're just not creating babies.
Right. That's right. But that's it. I remember, it's funny, one of my good friends, Elizabeth, she's amazing. She owns her own movie studio. She's an amazing human being. I look up to her a lot. I'm a big mentor and everything. She has 6 kids. And she was like, CK, you owe it to society to have as many kids as your wife will let you. And I'm like, what? And she's like, seriously, you've got to combat all those idiots having kids right now. While you're trying to lay out the foundation for your life and your family's life, they're just popping out babies. Snooki's pregnant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all you have to see. Look into that. And then, it's the that first scene of Idiocracy. You seen that scene?
No, I haven't.
And it talks about that. It just talks about how it shows this case study, and it's like these 2 couples sitting there, and it's like Tom, IQ 135, Mary, IQ 148, and they're like, yeah, we just got married. Tom's starting his radiology practice, and I'm, starting my law practice, and we just don't have time for kids right now. And then they cut to Billy Bob. He's drinking a beer, holding a baby on his lap. His wife's got a baby, drinking a beer, looking at a pregnancy thing, and like, damn it, I'm pregnant again. And they got little kids running around. And it's like, that's exactly the case. This last year, I would say maybe I knew 10 of my friends that have gotten pregnant. And I would say more than half, I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Because it's like, it's one of those things. And, it's a concern that is not a priority amongst the highly motivated and the ambitious, because it almost seems like it's standing in our way.
Yeah. So what is it? And do you mind put the microphone a little bit closer to in between us? It might help a little bit on the levels. So you bring up a couple interesting points here, and that certainly appears to be an issue, and it's an issue that's relatively recent. First of all, if you go all the way back to the state of nature, then at that point, it truly is sexual, survival of the fittest. The alpha male, whoever's the most fierce, the most cunning, the best, will, reproduce with as many women as possible. And that carried on through the human, genome for quite a long time. And probably, if you counted illegitimate children as well, it counted probably up until the 1900s almost, where mistresses were, and bastards, when the name bastard actually meant something, they had their wives, they had their mistresses, they were pretty prolific in the people they passed their genetics onto and kept. But now in our day and age, it's just simply not happening. And so it's almost like we're in a transitionary phase. We've gone from the state of nature which is pretty brutal and pretty, is not always an optimal state of being for the women in the species and everything else, but it made some sense for passing on the genetics. And then we're at this stage now, which is kind of this it almost feels like a transitionary phase, because it feels like it can't be sustainable. The best for evolution to continue on a positive line, we can't keep having the best and brightest producing one child, and the least common denominator producing 8, or 10. It's just we're gonna end up devolving to a certain degree, at least in a lot of key areas. So it seems like there has to be a different system to develop, or at least some kind of reduction in general numbers or pockets that could work or something. And we're almost getting into our utopia idea right now, which is, something I certainly want to talk about. But, how does this get reversed?
You're right. I think that it's a fairly recent thing, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, gender roles are really blurred right now. I think that what ended up happening is that ultimately, there is you mentioned the alpha male concept, but a lot of it also has to do with the fact that, the procreation aspect of a relationship, the procreation aspect of humans on this planet has become unglamorous. I struggle with it I have a younger sister, and I struggle with it because she's a very successful, she's got a master's in accounting from UT, and she's working at New York, Manhattan with PricewaterhouseCoopers, giant firm. And if she told me next week, hey, I found a guy, I'm going to sit at home and I'm going to pop out a bunch of babies, I would struggle with that concept, But in all actuality, what I just said 30 seconds ago argues that do it.
Yeah.
You absolutely should. Like, what are you doing? And it's the same thing. It's like we find that struggle because our that dissonance that happens in our brain, because what's attractive to me is a woman that's motivated, has their own life, has their own mind, has their own career. But then somewhere along those lines, it's like yeah, and you'd be prepared to make a sacrifice, the biggest sacrifice of everything you've worked for thus far. Take it on hold for a little bit, and let's pop out and let's plan for the next generation, kind of thing, you know. And it's a very contradictory statement, you know. But I think society has not viewed that as a goal.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I think that people would be laughed off of Ivy League schools if Ivy League started going, or women's lib movements would go crazy if Ivy Leagues at Harvard was like, we're going to pass a mother studies. You know, that women can major in being a mother and go in there and learn how to be a proper mother and learn how to be, you know, a good parent and blah, blah, blah. And that's an actual, like, degree, you know?
Yeah.
Because that seems misogynistic.
Yeah.
When, in fact, you know, what we're saying is that they hold one of the most important things on the planet is the most important thing is procreation, the ability to procreate. You know?
Yeah.
And so I think that until that changes, which I don't know how that could possibly change, again, because I in my head, there's dissonance right there. But until that changes, it's going to be real difficult because, again, then it becomes, it's accidental or the rare occasion where people get married and it's just a natural tendency for things.
Yeah. You know, it's been explored in all these dystopic kind of movies and things like Gattaca and things like that, where they've come up with some artificial solution where they're modifying genes and doing some other form of eugenics. And even the word eugenics has a really nasty, bad connotation. Almost like, ugh, you know, like you don't want to do that. But there has to be another solution. And the only thing that I can think of is breaking units back smaller. You know, like if you get back to the tribal kind of unit, which is a unit of, you know, a couple hundred closely banded individuals, you know, at that point you start looking for the welfare of the tribe through the future, you know, and then so passing on your kids to be functioning and powerful members of the tribe becomes a priority again. You know, you need to create that. And there's also some kind of, you know, when there's a limited amount of mouths to feed as well. You know, if you got, you know, the lazy drunk of your tribe, you know, trying to keep having kids, the rest of the tribe is like, yo, like, listen, you know, you need to contribute A, yourself, but B, you know, you can't be producing all of the mouths that we're going to have to feed. You know, you got to chill out. You got to find another method, you know. Here's the pull-out method. Like, give it a shot, you know, like whatever. So there's some kind of societal reinforcing fact, but right now everything is so big that it seems like it's almost impossible to kind of have that sense of community that would actually help create that. And certainly, you know, one major factor is, you know, religions have suppressed birth control and that whole concept since the beginning. You know, because the more Catholics that have babies, the more Catholics there'll be in 15 years or whatever. So they're just encouraging rampant reproduction at levels that are not ultimately sustainable. Yeah, I mean, it's the Malthusian equation, you know, and that's another problem. Our population is expanding geometrically, but food production can only expand arithmetically.
Of course, and that's exactly right. I mean, you have that. What you said was you know, correct in the sense of that in a tribal society, in a society of a smaller size, the accountability is back, kind of tying back to what I was saying before about accountability. I mean, at one point in time, you and I being friends, when you have kids, if I see your kid doing something stupid on the street, I'm going to go slap him upside the head and go, I know that Chris would want me to do this. Aubrey would want me to do this. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is, I'm going to call your dad and let him know that I beat you down in the middle of the street because you were doing something stupid. You know, because you were doing something. And I held that accountable. Nowadays, that has fallen off. You look at these kids going crazy in a grocery store with their parents nowhere to be seen. And you feel like I should be able to just go and pick one up and drop them off in the front, tie them to a stool up there and be like, I'm going to go find your parents and just wait right here. But nobody does that. And it's kind of like it's one of those things that the accountability has fallen away from all of us and trying to rise us up as like, you know, the rising tide raises all ships. It's like now we're just for us, me and me and me and me, and even
Yeah.
parents are like me, thinking like, how am I supposed to still have a good time when I've got this kid? I'm gonna
Yeah.
find a, you know, what I'm talking about, everything's me. I was an elementary school, elementary education major in college,
Mm-hmm.
and I did student teaching for a while, third grade, and I can't tell you how many times during the parent-teacher conference, the parent will come in and go, "Hey, Mr. Chin, why did my son get a C on this assignment?" And I'm like, talk to your son. Like, what are you talking about? Look at it.
Yeah.
He messed up. He got these answers wrong. It's math. There's
Right.
no, you know? And it was kind of like the understanding. I'm like, what in the world? And again, this goes back to that entitlement issue. I'm like, maybe your son's not smart and needs extra help.
Yeah.
You know? It's not, I think I was like, the downfall of man happened when we created the 8th place trophy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I hear you.
Society
I hear you.
we're like, we can't all be winners.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's dumb. That is it makes people not motivated. It makes people sit back and go, you know what? Because people are okay with just getting something.
Yeah.
You know, rather than going, man, there is a gold, a silver, and a bronze.
Yeah.
And everyone that also rans, like, man, like, that sucks. Like, you should, as a parent, sit there and go, man, we'll get them next time. I don't think you should necessarily walk home and go like, you suck, I can't believe you didn't win it.
Yeah,
game,
yeah,
blah, blah,
sure.
blah. But you shouldn't be like, yeah, you got 9th place. Like,
Yeah,
good for
yeah.
you. Like, no,
Right.
man, not good for you. Like,
Because then when they get back out into society, you know, that
Yeah.
doesn't hold.
It
You know,
doesn't
that
hold.
doesn't hold.
it doesn't hold.
Yeah.
But I see that so much, and like I said, especially even at that age, even at and again, it starts with the parents. It starts with that age. It starts at that level where you literally come by and go, "Why is my son failing your class?" And I'm like, "Because your son is not doing his work. He's not up to par with the rest of the students. He needs help."
Right. Right.
You know, I don't think you need to go all the way to the Asian side. We're a little bit too strict. We're like, "Hey, I got a 98. What happened to the little 2 points? Go sit in the corner," like
Yeah.
kind of level. You know, but at the same point, it's kind of like it's true. It's like, you know, aim towards that level of perfection. You know, I think that it's funny that you mentioned culturally. I mean, I remember I used to go tell my mom because, you know, some of my more quote unquote American friends would come by and tell me like, yeah, you know, my mom gives me $20 every time I make an A and $10 if I get a B. You know, and I'm like, you know, I don't get busted. My ass doesn't get hit if I don't get a B. If I get an A, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I told my mom, like, I went up and I was all happy and proud. I was like, "Hey, Mom, I cleaned my room without you asking." You know. And she looked at me and she was like, "You're supposed to clean your room." She's like, well, "Why am I going to give you any level of props for that?" She didn't say props, but
Yeah.
she's like, "Why am I going to give you any level of praise for that, for cleaning your room?" He was like, "If you clean my room, then I would give you
Right.
some.
That's
some
above and
praise.
beyond
It's
what-
above and beyond
the
what's
basic
expected."
level
But,
of what you should.
yeah, matter of fact,
providing.
if you don't clean your room, like I was about to come by and knock you out of bed to clean your room, but
Yeah.
you did it yourself, you're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you any props.
Yeah.
You know?
So, you know, I think the very smallest unit of organization is the family unit.
Right.
And I think if at least that is solid and there's a certain level of accountability in the family unit itself, then I think it produces, you know, children that are, you know, well functioning and, you know, strong contributors. If you have that, at least that one base unit to fall back on. Usually, you know, it used to be, or it could be, that you have both the family unit and the tribal unit, and then a strong sense of pride in the state unit or whatever larger entity, and it can keep going out, and you can still feel responsibilities to the larger entities. But right now, I mean, nobody really feels that. We mistrust our government because they're corrupt as fuck in a lot of ways. And we don't have that same pride in America, so that unit's, you know, fallen. There's some, you know, abstract state pride, but nobody really cares that much, you know, and there's absolutely no sense of tribe anymore, you know, for most people.
That's right.
And then even all the way back down to the family unit, that is not succeeding in a lot of ways as well. So there's almost no organizational structure that provides this sense of responsibility and commitment to anything outside yourself. So you get these very egocentric kind of focused thinking, which ultimately is not going to provide a beneficial community to all. You know, if
That's right.
everybody's just out for a quick grab for themselves, I think. And I think we're starting to see some of that consciousness shift a little bit. But the problem is we're so big now, it's so unwieldy, the amount of people we have and the amount of ignorance that it still exists. It's massive. It's incredible. That's why for me, the utopia concept is so appealing, because I don't have to deal with this big problem of these billions of people who have just been on the wrong direction, on the wrong path, haven't been, their spirituality has either been tainted by some misguidings from, organized religion, or just not cultivated at all because they've thrown out the ideas of religion. They're like, that's bullshit, so there's no God, because everybody's talking about God. I can tell that's wrong. So you have smart people who are atheists, and then you have other people who are just blindly following what some, power-hungry church leaders had created. And then so, you have these just masses of individuals, people who are going to go out and vote for Rick Santorum, for example, at some point. And how do you deal with those individuals? How do you change their mind? I think there was, I forget the exact quote, but some Catholic says, give me a child till he's 7 and I'll have a Catholic for life, or something like that. It's like, if you get ingrained in a certain path, it's so hard to change, especially when the big mind-blowing, when the changers, the sledgehammers that can make massive course corrections, the psychedelics, are made illegal. Like if you take some of these individuals and you go and give them a 24, 36-hour iboga experience, well, you know what? Maybe they'll change, and you see that with these heroin addicts and the amazing cure rates you get from them. People with ingrained, physical addictions, mental addictions, they can get some kind of massive course correction through that, and that's a possibility. But if you make that illegal, and you have these masses of people, and there's tons of people, even if it was legal, there's tons of people who'd be scared to death of it and would never do it. It's so hard to change your own mind, let alone anybody else's mind. So it becomes a state where it's almost like, fuck, like what can we do? How do we improve these masses of individuals? We could have a dinner party and probably change a couple minds, but there's millions more.
Right. And and we talk about it, and it's so much has to do with, eventually there needs to be a coup d'etat, right? There needs to be a situation where enough is enough, and a few of us have sit there and say that you're right. You talk about the utopian, and the only way it can exist is in a smaller setting. Because again, I believe that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that I used to joke about all the time. I could never be a cop, not because I'd be corrupt in the movie John Woo type sense, in the that level of that type of thing, but more of along the lines of, if I pulled you over and I'd be like, man, Aubrey, get out of here, like, what's wrong with you? You know what I'm talking about? And it's just one of those things that eventually, it makes sense that people, I think there's a tendency of people to be followers or leaders.
Yeah.
And I think that the utopian sense is saying that we work as a team, and some people are just okay with playing their role. But then eventually, and I see this on a very microcosm level at the restaurant that I run, is because there are people who naturally stand out as leaders, and then you make them have some sort of authoritative level, some sort of authority, managers or head key holding employees or whatever. But somewhere along the line, you make the mistake and you promote the wrong person,
mm-hmm.
and it causes a systemic problem.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's kind of, I feel like a lot of it has to do with just raising people to value education again. Mm-hmm. I think that the college and higher learning and even regular school has become a trade school. It has been, whereas the person of saying that, hey, we need to get a degree, and you're like, why do you need a degree? So I can get a high-paid job. And you're like, no, fool. Like, that's not why you need a degree. The sheet of paper doesn't make you any more educated than the next person. Yeah. There's people I know that has stumbled drunkenly through college and ended up with a sheet of paper that said that they spent 4 years and $80,000 and got this sheet of paper. and they're no more educated than somebody with a public library card that sits down and reads every day.
Yeah.
You know, but that is not valuable anymore. It's not. It is the end results that has become these physical, tangible results that have become what's attractive to people. You know, we talked about it as a man. You know, we want to attain certain things in order to attract females into our world, into our life. But I can't sit there and at a nightclub and start spouting Nietzsche, and all of a sudden a whole slew of these girls are going to come up and be like, oh my God, that dude's smart.
Yeah.
You know, like I really want to talk to him because he seems like he might be changing the world. It helps if I was spouting Nietzsche with a bottle of Dom in my hand and a bottle service and pulling up in a Maserati. Like
that's actually a very interesting point as well. It's almost like, you know, because ultimately for men at least, and I think, you know, there would be another analysis here that we can probably go in for female motivation. But for men, so much comes down to women. You know, I mean, I think Onassis, Jacqueline Kennedy's husband, said, you know, after JFK, said, you know, if it wasn't for women, money wouldn't matter. You know, I mean, he was like straight up, and he was one of the wealthiest men in the world. And I think that's a big part. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, really, is that. And I think it's come to the point where, you know, we're molding ourselves in the way that produces the most desirable effect. And that's not, you know, knowing Nietzsche and knowing philosophy and being a well-rounded, you know, individual like that. I mean, it will certainly in certain relationships, and you'll meet some, you know, a girl here or there that'll really appreciate your talents. But, you know, back a while ago, you know, the poets would be the ones that were getting the girls. Or in ancient Greece and Rome, the philosophers were the kings. You know, Socrates he could get all the little boys he wanted, you know, because of his mind. And he apparently, according to all other accounts, he was physically completely unattractive, but he could get any girl or any boy that he wanted in all of Greece because of his mind. And that's really not the case anymore. That's just not really truly valued by the opposite sex. So it's almost like a reaction. As a reaction to that, we're not cultivating that and appreciating that in a certain way. And it's kind of a fucked up thing, because you think like, oh, you should appreciate that for its own sake. And some of us do. But if you're not getting any positive reinforcement for it, you know, I think the masses are not going to adopt to it. You know, right. Most people are not going to do it. I mean, I was a philosophy major, but I had that was just because it was super interesting to me, you know, and I liked figuring shit out, and I was, right. You know, that was it. But I had no qualms that this would eventually, you know, some girl would be like, man, what a philosophical mind you have, you know. So that never crossed the way. And if that was the case, if that was really valued and appreciated, I think maybe the tide would turn.
And and you know what it is initially, I think that if you ask 100 women, 99 of them plus the last one would even waver and probably in that way and say that intelligence is a very important feature. But the fact of the matter is, it's secondary initially until you realize the after effects, the ultimate consequences of a lack of intelligence. You don't realize the trickle-down theory of somebody going, why is it that this dude who I've met, who is cool and funny, which comes from intelligence, who has a job, blah, 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 and then can't hold on to that job, or tends to make stupid decisions, and blah, 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 blah. And at the very end you go, because he's dumb. Like, that's why. He is not an intelligent person. Yeah. And these are the ramifications of that said situation. You know, I read somewhere the other day, there's like, you know, when will women realize, especially right now, there's this nerd chic. They talk about nerd chic, right? You know, with the glasses. Yeah. It's something really fashionable about being nerdy. And all these women's like, you know, we love nerds. Like, you don't love nerds. You love hot guys in glasses. Like, it's a difference, you know, because the nerds, the geeks, you know, the dweebs of all these of the world, you know, there's only enough time in the day to do X number of things, and to educate yourself, that takes a lot of time out of your day, and sometimes that doesn't allow you to perfect other aspects, and you have to have that balance. You have to sit there, just like you said. You and I had a private conversation that said that I need to maintain a little bit of balance, meaning I'm spending all my work maintaining a level of like success, or trying to work towards a certain level of success, but I've got to also not forget how to talk to people.
Yeah.
I can't forget how to do that. I can't neglect the fact that physically, over the last 3 months of me working at this, on this restaurant and sleeping very little, that I look in the mirror and go, man, I'm looking rough.
Yeah.
Like, I need to probably go back to the gym. I need to get a haircut. Like, these type of basic grooming, needs to be on the forefront. Whereas some people, that's on their forefront, and then all of a sudden goes,
everything else.
Yeah,
maybe I should work.
My basic math is not where it needs to be. And stuff like that. And so I think you're right. I think that there needs to be a change, and that's why it's funny, that I do say that there is a degree of that. What's valuable to the opposite sex will dictate a lot of it, but can that change within our lifetime? I don't know.
I don't know either. I think there was, even when I was going to high school, when I was going to high school, I was trying, for whatever reason, I don't know why I had this concept, but I was striving to be that kind of Renaissance, warrior poet, I guess, from the books that I would read and of antiquity, and I was going to high school, and I would write poetry, and I would play basketball, and I was attacking on all fronts and trying, and I was getting good grades, and I was doing that, and I was so bummed out because all of the best looking girls were hooking up with like the total burnouts, people that didn't give a fuck. They didn't shave. They didn't shower often. They just smoked some weed sometimes and just hung out. And they were, pretty dull individuals, but they were cool, I guess, then, because they were this kind of counterculture. And, and they would get all of the best looking girls. I remember finally in my junior year, I asked this one girl to prom, and she was really good looking, like this tall, modelly looking kind of girl. And she said yes, and I was pretty stoked. And then, like 3 days later, she gets in a relationship, this total burnout. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Why don't you guys go to the prom together? And so I talked to the guy, and he's like, nah, man, it's cool. You take her. You take her. I don't want to have to deal with all this shit. And I was like, no, like, I really don't want to take her. Like, this is your girlfriend. Like, fucking take her. This is what's right. This is what's proper. It's your girl.
Right.
But, and that just wasn't the case. So at some point, there has been this kind of resistance against that kind of idea that was that existed probably for most of the time. But there's been this kind of counterculture, this postmodern reaction to that type of individual, I think, that's been part of the deal. Now, that's kind of corrected more as we've gotten older, and the burnouts are, they've become a little more boring, and, people who are achieving things are a bit more interesting. At least they have more money, which seems to be,
very interesting.
Very interesting, yeah, the ultimate prize. But I don't know how, I think, I think it maybe goes back to, again, a smaller unit or a different stress, a different way to educate. Back in the day, there was no television and there was none of this other stuff. So interesting philosophy would pass hours of the day and captivate people, and a great poem recited would, leave someone spellbound, where now I think the mediums that are expressing, and I think it goes to the idolization of Hollywood. I think it's movies now.
Yeah, we're oversaturated.
It's movies and these other things that are becoming interesting. So it's the movie stars that are valuable, not the philosophers, not the poets, not the writers, not they are not the ones in the limelight. So I think I think that's, and not that movie making can't be a powerful art form and acting on itself. I mean, back in antiquity, actors were valued as well, but not to this wild extent where some reality star, just because their face was on TV and they took some shots and hooked up with some people on a TV show, makes them famous, makes them cool, makes them, the alpha in society. It's a weird situation.
Right, even the talentless have all of a sudden maintained some level of idolization. I think it's funny to think of it in those terms, but yeah, I agree. It's a matter of, I talk about an oversaturation of a lot of things. The amount of data that we're taking in on a daily basis now is astronomical compared to back in the day. I always talk about right now, one of the biggest shortcomings that has come, one of the biggest setbacks, and a lot of people probably won't agree with me, but is 24-hour news networks. Because back in the day, if something were to make the news, right, to the town crier or whatever it was, it was pretty important. I mean, you only had so much to talk about. But now, a 24-hour news network, we could sit there and we have just people like us, like you and I right now, just sitting here talking. And we're just talking. We're talking to see what we can come up with if we're trying to solve the world. But these people are talking to millions of people. Yeah. And we're trained to believe that these guys are trained to have some level of intellectual conversation.
Sure.
Whether or not you and I are smarter than the average person is irrelevant. But if we were on Fox News or MSNBC, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter who we are. People watch us and go, these guys are on TV. We better take a listen and see what they're trying to
Some kind of validation.
Some kind of validation. And then all we talk about is our opinions. And whether or not, and then all of a sudden it becomes truth. Because, again, I think that the lack of want to fact check and vet, people aren't looking up. Like if I said a word, if we said solipsis, right? You talk about solipsist, and you didn't know what solipsis was. Nobody went to go look that word up right now. Yeah. Maybe they did now that I said that. Now that I called them out, and say, "Hey, look, jackass, you didn't know what I just said. Yeah. That whole sentence made no sense to you because Aubrey said lipstick, and you were like lipstick. Yeah. And you're like, what the hell is he talking about?" But the fact of the matter is, the idea of that, nobody does their own fact checking. It goes with the line of this whole viral marketing. And everything's viral now. Things go crazy.
I think we're coming to a point though where people are starting to make more fact checks. Like this consciousness is coming. Like I know that, it used to be probably, in the 80s they got away with a fucking ton because if you were on the news and you were saying some shit, people just believed it. They just believed it. But now people are getting skeptical. And they're like, fuck these motherfuckers. They're lying to us. And more often than not, they come up and find out that they're right, that they are lying, and that there is some kind of shading of the truth. There is some kind of, it's so funny that, it's so obvious that a news network like Fox has a bias to the right, to the conservative side. And then another network will have a bias to the left. And it's just accepted. Like, that's cool. Like, okay, that's cool. These are news providers are doing it. So I think almost that whole methodology is going to have to is going to crash at some point.
It has to.
You think, but then there's so many people. We're talking to the people listening to this podcast, the people who listen to Rogan's podcast. That's a subset of individuals. They're not the ones sustaining the news networks. And are we even touching those other people? Do they? You hear people talking about Occupy Wall Street. They're like they just it's a place where a bunch of homeless people can go and hang out for free and camp out. It's like they're missing the whole fucking point. You're like, yeah, all right, there's some homeless people that are like, all right, sweet, there's tents here, I'm gonna chill. But that's not the point, right. And they can't even see the point when all of their whole city is getting changed by an ideal. This anarchist kind of reevaluation of the corruption of our society. That idea of the Occupy movement is just completely, it just goes over their head. It doesn't even touch them. So it's a weird, when I think about it, because I really want to make a difference, and I know you do, and I know Joe Rogan does, and I know a lot of people do, but it almost becomes like, how the fuck are we going to get, not just our listeners, but everybody to kind of wake up and pay attention? And I think things probably, unfortunately, are going to have to get a bit worse. There's going to have to be a bit more pain, either economically or environmentally or something, for people to really kind of wake up and take notice and be like, all right, something systemically is fucked up. And we need to change our thinking. We need to change our actions, or we're going to be heading, down a very wrong path.
And I think you're right with it getting worse. It's, also there's something harsh about it. I think there's something, we talk about nature and stuff. Nature is cruel, because it's unbiased. In the essence of an emotional bias.
Yeah, sure.
It's unbiased. I mean, I used to talk about it all the time, and it sounds bad because I've got a lot of friends with food allergies, but we talk about food allergies
Mm-hmm.
is a somewhat of a problem, meaning that there's nobody in some of these third world countries that has glucose allergy. Gluten allergy. Allergy. Because if you can't eat wheat, you're dead.
Yeah.
You don't have a chance to pass on that gene.
Right.
I'm not saying that people with gluten allergies should die, obviously, but I'm just saying that it is a symbol of saying that, if you ever read, Freakonomics and stuff like that, and they talk about it, and these are just statistics, that statistically speaking, we have found a way for us to overcome certain hurdles, and we're not necessarily sure if we should have. It's the conversation that says that whether or not we as a society should really pander towards the people who have not made an effort to benefit the society. Mm-hmm. It's the idea of criminals and so on and so forth, that a life sentence now is 17 years. Like, what in the world?
Yeah.
Is it worth it for us? And again, I'm being completely just throwing this out there. Is it worth it? It's a rhetorical question. Is it worth it for me to save one wrongly accused criminal by allowing all rightly accused criminals a chance for good behavior?
Yeah.
Like this type of thought process. I have a few good friends of mine that are locked up. Mm-hmm. And, I hope that when they come out, they learn their lesson. Yeah. And they're not murderers. But at the end of the day...
hopefully they're not put in there for smoking a joint somewhere.
That's right, exactly, something like that.
Some other stupid victimless crime.
But when it comes down to it, it's like, do these people who, on their third time getting caught murdering, or their fourth armed robbery, and you're like, at this point, you're like, do we need to take the time to try and rehabilitate and stuff like that?
Well, the methodologies, just from a practical standpoint, the methodologies of rehabilitation that they have are completely ineffective. I mean, there's this disconnect between what society tries to do and what is actually working. Like even in these prohibition of weed and alcohol, it doesn't fucking work, but we keep trying it. Like, let's keep trying. Same with the rehabilitation methods. So like, well, we had this program in place for 30 years and has a 98% recidivism rate where they all come back, like with child molesters. It's like fucking some astronomical number, like 98 goddamn percent of child molesters they let out molest another child. It's some ridiculous rate, and I'm sure the internet can find the exact rate, but it's extraordinarily high. And still, they don't change the methodology of how they are going to fix that. It's like, well, this is the system, this is the handbook, and that's part of the problem with these large bureaucracies. I mean, if you were in a tribe and someone molested somebody else's kid, and, you were setting up justice, well, yeah, maybe you fucking cut that guy's balls off if you don't, like some major thing has to happen in that smaller setting. The tribe would demand it, but now it's so abstract, it's like abstractly these things are happening. And so we just kind of let it be. I really think the more we talk about this and the more we figure it out, and I mentioned this on my last podcast with Rogan, I think the first step to try and fix things, we'd have to get states' rights back in a position of power, because I think to think that the nation is going to make the right choices, the huge nation, is ridiculous. But a state could become cool, and then so that would be a chance to actually start moving mass numbers in the right way. But somehow we got to start bonding together as in a communal sense and take it back a few levels, because all of these individuals unconnected to each other except by maybe some a few chat systems and a few message boards or whatever all operating, is just, it allows too much inefficiency to take place, and it doesn't allow fluid thinking. Bureaucracy moves so fucking slow, and everything right now is in this tumultuous time of change. It's not going to be able to adapt and keep up, and it's going to make some really fucked up decisions. Whereas if we broke it down to smaller units, the smaller units, well, some would fail and some would succeed, but at least there would be a chance,
And I think you're right also. You think about it in terms of your representative and who's representing you on a national level and who's representing you on a state level. And the thing about it is, the elephant in the room is, is that, do you relate at all to the senators?
Yeah.
At all, on any level. And myself as a young urban professional, right, as a yuppie, as it were, do I relate to Mitt Romney? Do I relate to these people? And what it boils down to is that the elephant in the room is that people are wanting to be represented, but then at the same time, it's like we have this conflict in saying that, well, yeah, we want a president that feels like the everyman, but you don't want that guy to be your leader. I don't want my president to be as smart as on the same reading level as me. I want him to be smarter than me.
Yeah.
And at the same time, though, that we talk about state, that's the guy that I want to be able to talk to, because you can relate to the problems that we're dealing with, because you're dealing with the same problem. We're living in the same neighborhood.
Yeah. The House of Representatives, the concept of it is great. There's going to be a representative for this district. But it doesn't mean shit anymore. It's just, they're either a Republican or a Democrat, and they're going to just be another cog in the goddamn machine. They don't care. They're not going to be able to affect change for their district. What if your representative could make major laws happen and be like, okay, Travis fucking County says weed and mushrooms are legal, bitches. And, that was their prerogative, their authority. All of a sudden, Travis County would be the fucking most commercially viable county in Texas, and people would be going in there, and it'd be really interesting what would happen, because they would be concentrating. But at least they would have the prerogative to make some impact, to make some rules that could make a difference, or at least be an actual representative, change something. They don't do. It's nothing now. It's meaningless. It's an R or a D, and that's it. And they just feed back into the machine, and they make compromises so that they can get some minute compromise in place the next time, and they just keep this fucking circle of hand jobs going around until everybody gets fucked.
That's right. It's exactly the conversation that we've had, that I've had with multiple people, is that it not only is it difficult to understand government, about how the bureaucracy works, it's difficult to even follow, to even research about local government, because just like you said, there's no effort put into it, because generally the vast majority of people feel that, other than maybe the mayor, they feel that that the local government is inconsequential. Yeah. Otherwise, on Tuesday, I would go down to a bar and be like, hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, tomorrow's a city council meeting, man. We're all going to go roll down there and listen to see what they have to say.
Yeah.
Nobody does that. I can't. There's not the most educated people in the city, other than unless people with visions of being part of government, becoming mayor or something, they're not there. I've gone to more city council meetings in this last year than I've ever been to, because of trying to understand what my rights are as a business owner, and trying to, whenever there's a vote about parking or something like that, I would go down there and try to listen to it. But I'm like, I don't see any of my friends there.
No.
None of these, and none of even the movers and shakers are there. None of my friends that, highly successful businessmen, they're like, they know what they need to do and who they need to do, what palms they need to shake and stuff like that. But that is not, again, we let's segue all the way back to, we're talking about what's glamorous and what's instant gratification. There is zero gratification about that. I don't walk out of those city council meetings because
there's nothing you can do.
Nothing gets done.
Back, again, I keep going back to antiquity, and we're about out of time here, but I go back to antiquity, and I look, and the people, they would be in these Senate meetings, and they would be in these council meetings back in the Greek democracies, because things mattered, like they would be keenly interested in the decisions being made. Not always decisions were made, and sometimes there's fucked up emperors and things, and all kinds of things got all fucked up. I'm not saying that it was great back then. A lot of stuff sucked. I mean, they threw their shit out the window out on the main boulevards in Rome. It's not like a perfect situation, but at least there was some sense for a while, for different periods, where the people who were there were doing their goddamn best to lead the people, and there was feedback. The people had feedback to the senators, had feedback to the decision makers there, and that feedback loop is something we got to bring back somehow.
Yeah. My last thing I was going to say is that that's exactly right. One of the things that I've always prided myself on is the pragmatism. When any of the businesses that I've ever run, is that when people come at me with a legitimate, especially my employees, even more so my guests, the consumers, but come with me with a legitimate grievance, I respond to it. Mm-hmm. They see the change.
Yep.
Right away.
Yep.
And people respond so viscerally, so like strong to things, that one of the strongest feelings that people get is that my voice was heard.
Yeah.
As an employee, they sit there and come up to me and say, CK, it is hot as hell in the kitchen. And then 2 weeks later, I have replaced my AC unit, fixed it, and now it's 10 degrees cooler. I might have extended my lifetime with these guests, with these chefs, by another 5 years. They're going to be like, you know what, I love working for this place because my voice was heard.
Your voice was heard, yeah. And I think, and that's not only an issue with government; it's almost an issue with corporations.
Yeah,
now. Like a comment card to AT&T, you're like, yeah, I'm sure those motherfuckers care about that. They care about my drop
circular file cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. But a smaller unit, you can actually listen to your customers, and I've seen that firsthand. I mean, we'll get some customer requests and stuff for on it, and we'll respond and we'll make a change and we'll address it. And these people are stoked, because we're in, we're at a stage that we're big enough where most people don't respond, and when we do, they're like, holy shit, because we're not used to that anymore. We're not used to letting our concerns and our needs be heard.
Sure.
So. Well, CK, there's a lot more we got to figure out here. Yeah. I think this is just the beginning. This is the part one, but the Virgin podcast, the Warrior Poet Project, is in the books, and I really appreciate you coming out. And
that was an honor.
Definitely going to have to do this a lot more often. So
absolutely.
Thanks for the first people listening in here, and right. we'll get our sound and our video and everything up to top notch here, and in a kind of working practice. So bear with us here at the start, and. It's going to be a long, fun ride. I don't see myself stopping this journey for a long time. So, and CK, I hope you can be here as much as you can, because this was a really great conversation.
Man, as often as you can invite me, man.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Take care.
Take care.